Good morning and peace be upon you this beautiful Sunday, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban Review Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can keep this content going. It's been a wild week in healthcare. The last time there was this much attention on healthcare, I think it's when Bernie Sanders was running for president back in 2016, and the talk of the town was Medicare for all. And given that they caught the guy, Luigi, and the memes, by the way, are wild. You guys are just wild with the memes. I saw a meme of like Luigi, Super Mario brother Luigi, with his shirt off, all muscular, shooting Bowser. And like, you guys, the internet is too much. It's enough internet for one day. I had to turn it off after I saw that one. But they caught him, and it turns out that he's got a healthcare story. He suffered some kind of a back surgery, couldn't get treatment. His mother suffered severe pain. United Health wouldn't cover. And he comes from a pretty wealthy background, from a pretty well-established background. And there's actually a lot of protests in his favor in his hometown of people upset that he's being charged and prosecuted. It's a really wild phenomenon watching everyone kind of rally around him. And there's this big push that, well, are we going to justify vigilante murder? And are we going to justify? And the point that I think is important to bring up is that if you agree murder is bad, I think we all agree murder is bad, but you don't view insurance corporations denying critical medicine to people, knowing full well that they are going to die as a result. If you don't view that as a form of murder, then you don't, in fact, believe murder is bad. You just believe rich people should be able to kill poor people without accountability. And when poor people kill rich people, you clutch your pearls. Like, that's a hypocrisy that we're calling out. We're not sitting here and saying, yeah, let's go kill people. No, we're not saying that at all. What we're saying is, if we agree murder is bad, then let's condemn murder. Why are we justifying certain forms and not others? Is a quick murder worse than a slow, painful death as you watch your loved ones deteriorate? I mean, give me a break here. And that's what I want to talk about today, because the reality of America's violent health system is something that we need to grapple with. There's a quote by Gene Rostand, a philosopher who passed away, I think, in the 1970s. And he goes, kill a man and you are a murderer. Kill millions of men and you are a conqueror. In the week's headlines reporting the killing of the CEO of United Health really kind of capture this quote in real life. We can agree, we need to be able to agree that in the wealthiest country on earth, no parent should have to watch their severely asthmatic child gasp for air because health insurance corporations deny them care. And this is not a hypothetical. In 2017, I got a phone call from my wife, Aisha, frantic as she's driving our then 4-year-old son to his doctor as he suffered an asthma attack. I was out of state. I felt helpless, but if there's one person, Aisha's the mama bear you want. And I knew she would make sure our son was safe, but she was frantic. Gets to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh, I'm sorry, your health insurance company doesn't cover this kind of an emergency. We're not going to cover it." And so Aisha says, "I don't care. I'll pay out of pocket. I'll clear out whatever I have in our savings. I pay out of pocket." The doctor says, "Well, we actually can't accept your cash payments because the insurance company has a provision restricting cash payments when they are your insured." So ridiculously, they rejected treating our son. And then even more ridiculously, the insurance company was simultaneously denying us coverage while preventing our doctor from treating us because I guess they didn't want to lose on the revenue of a cash payment. So Aisha then rushes our son to the emergency room where they're able to treat him and alleviate his asthma attack. It took us more than a year to pay the several $1,000 emergency bill. Our health insurance company, who might it be, you ask? United Health. And the thing is, our story is not unique. And these consequences are absolutely staggering. According to The Lancet, at least 68,000 Americans die preventable deaths every single year because they are denied care or they can't afford the care they need to live. 68,000 people. That's your grandparents, your children, your loved ones, your spouse, your siblings, your children lost because healthcare in America is treated as a commodity rather than a basic human right. And so you can express disgust at the reckless killing of the United Health CEO. You should express disgust at that. But why stop there? Where is the outrage at United Health for perpetually being the worst offender and rejecting more insurance claims than any other company? 32%, a third of claims made to United Health are rejected. Industry average is 16%. It should be 0% because if a doctor says you need medication, that should be enough. Doctors aren't prescribing chemotherapy for the fun of it. They're not prescribing radiation therapy because they feel like it, right? Nobody is getting AIDS medication for fun. It's a life-saving medication. Nobody is saying, let's have an asthma attack because I'm bored. Like, it's just enraging to me that insurance companies have decided we are the arbiters of medical access, not the actual doctors who went to school for 15 years to get a specialization in a particular disease that your child has. And we'll talk about that in a second too. My child was among the 32% of patients suffering in medical emergency denied care because United Health felt their right to make money was more important than my child's right to live. Last year, United Health fired its intake team and implemented an AI technology to process insurance claims for senior citizens. You know what happened? 90% of claims were rejected. These are senior citizens. These are people who are on critical medications that they need to live every single day. 90% of those claims were rejected. And guess what? Senior citizens died. People died because they decided, United Health decided, we're not making enough money. We're not making enough in billions of dollars. And I'll talk about how much they made in just a second. We need to make a little bit more. And so they implemented this AI and people died. And so the question is, why are people laughing at the killing of a CEO? If you saw the Facebook page post about expressing sad and shock at the killing of Brian Thompson, the CEO, it has, I think, 70, 80,000 reactions. More than 90% are the laughing emoji. People just laughing at the killing of a CEO. Now, I don't think people are naturally cynical or evil-minded. I don't think that people are naturally cruel. I do believe people see the hypocrisy of lamenting the preventable death of one CEO worth tens of millions while ignoring the annual preventable death of 70,000 Americans not worth tens of millions. That's just the reality. It doesn't have to be this way. Countries around the world have proven that a universal healthcare model is possible. And in the show, we're going to be talking about the myths around universal healthcare. We're going to debunk them. I'm also going to share a deeply personal story about my daughter, Hannah Noor, and what we've had to go through to make sure she can get the life-saving medication that she needs, the medicine that she needs to actually live, and the hell that insurance companies have put us through. And I'm sharing her story not because it's special, but because sadly, it is far too common. That's the reality. And the thing is, this is not just a Republican versus Democrat issue. Republicans and Democrat Americans are united that we need healthcare, and Republicans and Democrat politicians are united that they are going to be sycophants for the pharmaceutical and big health industry. Talk about Democrats too. I ran for Congress against a Democrat, a guy named Bill Foster, who's voted 3 times with Republicans to gut the Affordable Care Act, to strip away protections of people with pre-existing conditions, to strip away protections of people who have disabilities. Had he been successful, it would have been a literal death sentence for my children, but this guy's worth $20 million. He gets $500,000 in campaign donations from health insurance companies, including United Health. The hell does he care? But this is the reality we face. This is an ongoing struggle, and we cannot relent. The point of the Gene Rostand quote that I mentioned at the top of this show is that the man responsible for the killing of the United Health CEO, he is ostensibly a murderer. Meanwhile, United Health and the for-profit insurance industry that enabled these deaths of more than 1 million people in the 21st century alone are on the covers of Fortune and Forbes and Wall Street Journal. They're hailed as corporate conquerors. That's the fundamental problem that we have to deal with. When we come back from break, I'm going to dive into this deeply personal, deeply vulnerable story, and then we'll get into debunking the myths around universal healthcare. This is an area I believe that Americans I don't care if you're ultra MAGA or a Bernie bro or somewhere in between. This is an area where I believe we can stand united and say to the insurance companies, enough is enough, enough exploitation, enough death and destruction. We need healthcare as a human right. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, hit that subscribe button. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can keep creating this content. It truly goes a long way, especially with the ongoing failure of corporate and legacy media. We need your support to continue to speak truth to power and to uphold a sense of justice. I promise to talk about our daughter and the deeply personal story that I want to share about her. And I want to emphasize that I'm sharing this not because I think this story is special. I'm sharing it because unfortunately it's all too common. And we need to elevate these stories and make sure people understand the reality of what so many Americans are facing right now. I read just a mortifying statistic that I want to start the show with that just blew my mind. It looked at what people are sacrificing to take care of healthcare debt. 17% of people filed bankruptcy. 19% of people changed their actual living situation to get to a more affordable home so they could take care of their healthcare bills. 24%, 1 in 4 Americans had to seek charity, like actual charity, to pay for basic supplies. People that wouldn't have had to lean on charity otherwise did so simply because they got sick. 28% delayed buying a home or delayed pursuing an education. You want to talk about the impact on the economy? This is it right here. 40%, 2 in 5 people got an extra job just to pay for healthcare. 2 in 5 people. When you hear about the low unemployment rates, think about that. People are underemployed. They're working double and triple jobs. You can't call it low unemployment when people are being indentured servants to the work that needs to get done. 48%, half of Americans out there used up most or all of their savings to pay for healthcare. You know the statistic that 90% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency? This is why. And here's the one that gets me. 63% of Americans, nearly 2/3 of Americans, cut spending on food and clothing and other basic necessities to pay for healthcare. They cut spending on food to pay for healthcare. And you look at the profits earned by health insurance corporations. 71 billion in profits in 2023. 71 billion. United Health went from an $8 billion profit in 2013 to a $32 billion profit in 2023. 8 billion a year to 32 billion a year. Cigna went from 2 billion to 8 billion. CVS went from 6 billion to 14 billion. I can go on and on. But the health insurance industry went from a $22 billion profit in 2013 to 71 billion in 2023. And 68,000 Americans a year die due to lack of healthcare. 500,000 file for medical bankruptcy. And 2/3 of Americans cut their food, cut access to basic food so they could pay their healthcare bills. You want to know why people are pissed off? This is why. And so I share this story about my daughter with that context in mind, because every year, thousands of children and adults suffer this incomprehensible pain and suffering and even death, not because we lack the means to treat them, but because exploitative insurance companies, incompetent bureaucrats, and cruel, apathetic, ass-backwards politicians deny them access to the life-saving care that they need. I remember the night. It was just after her 6th birthday in 2021. We heard a scream in the dark. And for parents out there, you know there's different kinds of screams. You know what scream is, I'm annoyed. You know what scream is, I'm just trying to get attention. You know what scream is, I'm trying to get my sibling in trouble. And you know which scream is, I am mortified beyond belief. I don't know what's happening. Someone please come save me. That was the scream in the middle of the night. We rush to her room and we find out that she has thrown up all over her entire bed, everywhere. We clean her up, we change her bed sheets, change her clothing, give her a shower, and we blame the incident on the Oreos she had eaten after dinner. She's allowed 3 Oreos. She had like 7 or 8. We thought, okay, this is probably what happened. Silly mistake, won't happen again. The next day, she complained that she had a stomach ache, and we rushed her to the bathroom, severe diarrhea. We thought, okay, maybe it's a bug. Kids get diarrhea every now and then, not a big deal. But my wife and the women's intuition kicked in, and she goes, something is wrong. A couple days later, it happens again. Stomach pain was more severe. She screamed, she cried, rushed to the bathroom, and this time there was blood. Just so much blood. It's terrifying. And before we could make it to urgent care, she had another episode with even more bleeding. We had no idea what was happening. We're mortified. We hurry her in, and they tell us, oh, it's just a virus. Keep her hydrated. She's fine. This did not seem right. She's our third kid. We're not new to being parents. We've never seen anything like this before. Between my wife and I, we've got, on her side and my side, we've got more than a dozen nephews and nieces. We've never seen any of our nephews and nieces have something like this happen, certainly not our kids. Now it's just before Thanksgiving 2021, and we've convinced ourselves that she'd recover over break. Maybe she just needs some time off. She loves school. She loves kindergarten, as most kindergartners do, but the bleeding continued. The pain worsens. More urgent care, more pediatrician visits, no answers. By now, our daughter, who is energetic and chatty and hyper and loves being a prankster, she's pale, she's frightened, she's visibly losing weight. Reached out to a close friend who happened to be a pediatric GI physician, one of the best in the country, and he questions and questions and questions, and it became clear to us that this was not a simple virus. He connects us with the GI team at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C., and says, you need to go see this doctor. We get insurance hurdles. Insurance is blocking us, saying you don't need this. You're overreacting. Weeks pass, her condition worsens. She's losing weight, more bleeding, more pain, more torture, more screaming, more vomiting, and nothing from the insurance company. We finally secured an appointment with a GI doctor. Our daughter is now only 29, 30 pounds. She should be about 45, 50 pounds. She's lost about 40% of her body weight. Skin and bones, we can see kind of this gaunt look on her face. Her fear of eating, going to the bathroom, or even moving too much is consuming her because everything causes pain. We get her on iron supplements. We get a colonoscopy scheduled. Our winter break becomes just a prison cell. We're trying to navigate through this darkness. We have no idea what's happening. And the preparation for this colonoscopy was torture, a 24-hour liquid diet. Imagine telling a 6-year-old child that you can't eat for 24 hours. Make matters worse, a severe thunderstorm hits the area, and we have no power or no heat in the freezing cold for 3 days. We finally make it to the hospital. I remember holding her hand. My wife and I are holding her hand as she goes under the anesthesia. They do the colonoscopy, and they come back, and our worst fears are confirmed. She has massive ulcers all over her colon. Massive bleeding ulcers all over her colon. She has IBD, a chronic lifelong condition that requires extensive management. And the doctors are explaining the gravity. And my wife asks, how long will she need to be on medication? And the doctor replies, I need you to understand what I'm saying. This is for life. There's no cure. It was this moment of just feeling crumbled and shattered, that this sweet 6-year-old girl was going to have to suffer through this for the rest of her life. We get her on steroids with mesalamine, and we're trying to manage it, but it's not working. We go back and forth with different types of, foods and medications, and different types of, gluten-free diets, and the what's called the FODMAP diet. Nothing is working, right? Everything is a battle over food. She's vomiting, she's bleeding, and we realized that we need to get her on what is called biological treatment. This would be a direct IV infusion of medication to stabilize the IBD every 6 to 8 weeks forever. And the thing is, this was it. This was the end of the road. If this didn't work, it would require massive surgery to remove part of her colon, remove part of her intestine, have an external bag. I mean, it would completely change her life. She would be disabled for the rest of her life. And so we filed the insurance claim for the biologics. And guess what happens? Our insurance company says, nope, we don't think she needs it. Turns out insurance companies block more than 51% of patients whose doctors prescribe them biologic treatment to save their lives. 51%. Now, this treatment is not a cure, but it's a chance at living a healthy life. And our insurance rejected us again, outright, reasoning that we hadn't tried other medications, a policy called step therapy. So despite our daughter's life-threatening condition, they wanted us to try every other variation of every other possible medication imaginable, knowing full well that it would likely fail just as much and make our daughter suffer, make her vomit, make her bleed, make her lose even more weight, make her miss school, destroy any chance of having a normal life. But that didn't matter to these guys, no, because this was the path to ensure they maximized shareholder value. That's their holy grail. That's their God. Our doctor stepped in and conducted a peer-to-peer direct meeting with the insurance company to show them all the data and blood tests and medical reports to say, look, the other medications that you want her to try are not going to work because they don't address the actual issue here. This is not rocket science. This is not new age science. This is well-known, documented fact. Insurance company says, yeah, we hear you, but we're going to say no anyway. I mean, our doctor showed without a shadow of a doubt that these untried medications are just not going to work because they're not different than the medications that we have tried that haven't worked. Insurance company still refused. Had Underwood's condition worsened. She was pale, swollen from steroids, completely in pain constantly. Imagine watching your child in that kind of pain constantly. And so I said to Aisha, I'm like, look, what if we pay for this out of pocket? It's only 6 doses a year. How much could one dose actually be? So checked with the doctor and said, look, we're going to try to pay for this out of pocket because we just need to get our daughter the medication she needs. I'll do whatever I need to do. Remember I shared the report earlier, how people sell, their homes and cut down on resources to pay for healthcare. That was about to be us. And by the way, it still is us. But we thought we could afford these doses, 6 a year, we'll figure it out. Each dose cost up to $40,000. A year's supply to keep our daughter alive would have been about $250,000. We did not have that kind of money, to say the least. And so we contemplate what any parent might contemplate, right? Do we sell the house and move into a small apartment and use our equity? Do we set up a GoFundMe? Do we borrow money from family and friends? Do we take out a second mortgage? What do we do? Do we file for medical bankruptcy as 500,000 Americans do annually? Do we take out a loan? I mean, there's so many questions. But then we learned another sinister result of the privatization of health insurance. That is that even if we had $250,000 lying around for 1 year, the hospital wouldn't accept it. Why? Well, because the industry is not, it's not only that they don't accept 51% of claims, but they have enacted policies forbidding people from paying for the critical medication they need out of pocket. Why? Because the insurance company does not want to lose control and revenue. The basic idea is either you pay us or you pay no one. This is something I'd expect out of a mafia handbook. It's not something I'd expect out of a healthcare provider. This is not health insurance. This is health exploitation. In that moment of sheer anger and frustration, we happened to run into a fellow parent who's since become a great friend and learned that her children suffer a similar medical struggle. And she suggested calling the biologic manufacturers directly and applying for their patient assistance program. Now, this is an idea that seems super obvious now, but at the time, it was something that we didn't even know was possible. The application was tedious, went back and forth, even got rejected a few times. But after a few weeks of back and forth, countless phone calls, countless sleepless nights, we had a miracle. We finally secured approval. After 2 years of suffering and suffocation, of my daughter bleeding, of her vomiting, of her being in severe pain, of missing school, of losing weight, we finally got approval. And it wasn't through the insurance company, who never even bothered to offer us an option. Rather, the approval was from the drug manufacturer directly. To this day, our health insurance company, Oscar Health, by the way, has refused to budge on the cruel and calloused policy of maximizing shareholder value, because that's what they have to do while denying our daughter the medicine she needs to live. So finally, in March of 2024, more than 2 months after the doctor prescribed it, more than 2 years after our daughter started suffering, our daughter finally got the actual infusion therapy she needed. And it was like a light went on, a complete shift on her joy, on her energy levels, her spark of light returned. She was back. A process that should have taken at the most 60 days from the night we heard that scream in the dark took us 28 months on a torturous journey. And you should see our daughter now after she started this biologic treatment. She's eating, she's playing, she's drawing, her weights have returned back to normal. She's even learning karate, currently a yellow belt, so watch out. The last 3 years of her life have been a torture. I mean, it's a third of her life has been a torture. And now she's finally thriving as any 9-year-old girl should. And yeah, we're still afraid that she'll have flares and looms, and sometimes she feels a little bit nauseous, but it's not dictating our lives anymore. For the insurance company, those corporate leeches also denied covering the actual hospital costs as well. And that's the money we're spending, several $1,000s a year, in addition to our premiums and co-pays and deductibles out of pocket. Now, despite us paying our insurance premiums every single month without exception, our insurance company has not covered a single penny of our daughter's critical healthcare needs. Not one single penny of the care that she needs to live. But hey, they are maximizing shareholder value. Good on them. Leeches. Now, the thing is, this is not just a story about my daughter with IBD. It's about the systemic barriers that hundreds of millions of families are facing every single day in America. From insurance denials to inaccessible care to the step therapy nonsense to this prior authorization red tape BS, the system fails the most vulnerable. And the thing is, what if we didn't speak English? What if we couldn't afford the out-of-pocket costs for all the tests and treatments, which ran into the thousands and thousands of dollars? What if one of our close friends didn't just happen to be a national expert on the particular rare disease? And what if he couldn't leverage his relationships to get us connected to the world-leading experts who can give us the treatment we needed in the first place? What if we didn't randomly run into a fellow mom who knew an option for us to get access to the care that we needed? You know, we named our daughter Hannah Noor because Hannah was the mother of Mary, mother of Jesus, and Noor means light. We couldn't think of a more beautiful name for our only daughter, and she has lived up to that every single day of her life and of our lives. She suffered immensely, but she's living proof that even in the darkest moments, there is a beacon of light. There is hope. We cannot lose hope. But that also means that we need to put in the work. And that requires us to understand what work needs to be done and what restrictions prevent us from getting universal health care. It's our responsibility to demand better, not just for our daughter, but for all the daughters and sons and children out there. Because again, the most frustrating part about all this is that the medication to save our child's life existed all along. It was right there. It's like a person is dying of thirst and a water company has more water than they could ever drink and says, nah, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm enjoying watching you die of thirst. Some calloused, abusive sociopath at a health insurance company decided that my daughter's life wasn't profitable enough and worth saving. And so decided, we're going to go ahead and accept this claim. Let her die. We don't care. Thank God we found another option. The thing is, we do not suffer from a lack of resources. We suffer from an excess of greed. We can ensure high quality, accessible, and affordable healthcare for all people in this country, but we cannot ensure the satiation of greed for the billionaire corporations, corrupt politicians, and corporate political elitists who care more about shareholder value than the survival of innocent children. We have to choose one side. I choose the side of our children of this country, of this great country, and I hope you do too. When we come back from break, I'm going to do a deep dive into what is blocking us from getting guaranteed universal health care and debunking every single myth you've ever heard, because I'm going to tell you, whether you are a staunch MAGA, ultra MAGA Republican, or a strong leftist, we have to be united on this, because this is my child, your child. And I don't care what your political affiliations are, your child is to me a beautiful child of God and deserves the same human dignity that every child out there deserves. And we need to fight for them to have access to this basic healthcare. We absolutely do. Because while my wife and I had the means to support and provide for our daughter, a lot of parents don't. And it's not their fault. And we need to be there. That's how we are our brother's keeper. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. When we come back, we're debunking every myth you have ever heard against universal healthcare. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button and help me continue this advocacy, because look, your subscription goes a long way. And even if you're a free subscriber, telling you it makes a huge difference. So hit that subscribe button and let's keep the advocacy going. All right. We've been talking about the violence in America's healthcare system and the dire need for us to have guaranteed universal healthcare as a human right. And there are so many myths and allegations that come up about, how we can't afford universal healthcare. And, if we have universal healthcare, then the quality of care is going to plummet. And it's going to put millions of people out of work and all sorts of nonsense. And the thing is, I don't want to just dismiss those as nonsense claims, because if people have those concerns, they deserve an answer. And I'm going to spend the last 15, 20 minutes of the show doing a quick dive into this, just to provide you some receipts about this. First, we got to understand, universal healthcare has been something that this country's tried to enact for a long time. Back on May 20th, 1962, JFK delivered an impassioned speech at Madison Square Garden in favor of universal healthcare. Decades later, even back in 2006, nearly 70% of Americans believe that government should guarantee healthcare as a human right. And even now, a new Gallup poll that just came out, it shows that 62% of Americans still believe in guaranteed universal healthcare. And despite this decades of support, not a single presidential candidate had the courage this cycle to run on this wildly popular platform. And, I just shared the story of my daughter and kind of the struggles that we're going through. And I got to tell you, the response I received was overwhelming. It was overwhelming empathy and compassion, not just from fellow people who I would identify with me on the left, but people on the right. People who self-identify as ultra MAGA conservatives emailed me and said, man, I'm sorry about your daughter. And you're right, we need healthcare as a human right. I'm getting this from Bernie, social democrats as well. Americans get it. Healthcare needs to be a human right. Sadly, politicians, Republicans, and too many Democrats alike don't get it. They worship at the altar of corporate donations. The health insurance industry annually spends $700 million on lobbying politicians to do their bidding. And that doesn't even include the money to spend on super PACs to block out candidates who would dare run on a platform of guaranteed universal healthcare. These same healthcare corporations then engage in a mass media blitz of misinformation and disinformation to convince people to vote against their own self-interest. In reality, guaranteed universal healthcare is a proven model adopted by every single developed nation on earth and many lower income developing economies. And so I don't have the $700 million in corporate lobbying money to push propaganda, but I do have the facts. The facts about health insurance corporations in America and the facts that they hope that we don't understand regarding the importance and the viability of universal healthcare. So I just want to cover 5 main arguments against universal healthcare and debunk them. And I hope that you feel compelled to share this with your network. Let's start with the first one. We can't afford universal healthcare. The opposite is true. Dozens of studies, in fact, more than 20 studies on this very question have all concluded the exact same thing. Universal healthcare will save us about $450 billion every single year. And by the way, these aren't just left-leaning studies. The Mercatus Center, which is a right-leaning think tank, actually a pretty strong right-wing think tank, did a study. They did a study to prove that universal healthcare would be not viable. And guess what they found? That it would save us $2 trillion over the next decade. $2 trillion. Look, we can't forget that right now, already about 73 million Americans are on Medicaid, 68 million Americans are on Medicare, 10 million Americans are on TRICARE, which is the veterans healthcare. So in our nation of about 335 million people, about 150 million are already on a universal or near universal healthcare model. And guess what? These programs cost significantly less than the exploitative for-profit healthcare model. The overhead on these programs is 2 to 3%. while the overhead on the for-profit healthcare industry is 20% minimum, plus a near unlimited markup on prescription drugs. So in this, we already have a side-by-side comparison of access to the exact same doctors, exact same medications, except one has a nominal markup and the other one has a 10x markup. You don't need an MBA in finance from the University of Chicago to understand that the same product or service without the massive markup is a smarter path to take. So yes, we can afford universal healthcare because it's $500 billion cheaper a year. What we can't afford is the current exploitative model. Myth 2, if costs go down, so does the quality of care. Simply not true. It's important to understand why costs decrease under a universal healthcare model. Every single one of the above studies, the 22 studies that I cite, find that the quality of care would not decrease with universal healthcare. Costs under a universal healthcare model decrease because we stop wasteful spending. Consumer rights activist and scholar Diane Archer explains this really well, and I'm quoting her. She goes, Medicare for all is far less costly than our current system, largely because it reduces administrative costs. With one public plan negotiating rates with healthcare providers, billing becomes quite simple. We do away with the 3/4 of the estimated $812 billion the US now spends on healthcare administration. This is not on healthcare application, just administration. Administrative costs are so high because thousands of insurance companies individually negotiate benefit rules and rates with thousands of hospitals and doctors. On top of that, they rely on different billing procedures, and this puts cost burdens on providers. It's inefficient, end quote. So under a universal healthcare model, the doctors that exist now would still exist. The medicines that exist now would still exist. The procedures that exist now would still exist. The only thing that wouldn't exist are the ridiculous and pointless administrative costs from for-profit insurance corporations. Universal healthcare does not cut out healthcare itself. It cuts out the pointless middleman insurance company. And that is what saves costs. In fact, speaking of high quality of care, a Yale study found that if we had universal healthcare during the pandemic, we would have saved at least 335,000 lives. 335,000. That's larger than most every city in America. Myth 3. Universal healthcare puts millions out of work. Look, the question is a very important question though, because there's about 1.8 million Americans who work in the medical billing industry. So what would happen to those 1.8 million? If we shut down the entire private healthcare system and say that we're not going to allow you to exploit us anymore, what happens to those 1.8 million workers? Well, I want to answer this question as directly as possible. First, remember that about 40% of these jobs are already in the Medicaid and Medicare and TRICARE industries, which is essentially universal healthcare for a portion of society. Therefore, we're not talking about 1.8 million jobs, we're talking about 1 million jobs, which is still a large number. So what do we do with those million jobs? Well, hence the second point. Expanding Medicare to accommodate another 175 million people will necessarily require medical billing professionals. It will necessarily require administrators to do those jobs. You can't just more than double the number of people and expect the same number of medical billing people to accommodate that. No, you need to hire more people. So it's not about eliminating jobs, it's about transitioning workers from the for-profit exploitative model to a not-for-profit system that prioritizes access to healthcare. And then remember, ending the for-profit exploitative model saves us $450 billion annually. That's money, that gives us options. And these are excellent resources that we could, for example, spend on a 2-year severance for the people in medical billing who do lose their jobs. Spend on adequate funding to train them to allow them to become proficient in a new job. Indeed, at $70 billion annually, 4-year public college is a fraction of the money we would save annually by shifting from an exploitative for-profit model to a universal healthcare model. The reality is that it's not that jobs will be lost, it's that we can't afford not to make the shift. And finally, we have to agree on something, that maintaining an industry, despite the harm that industry is causing, is not really a great argument. As I mentioned, The Lancet, which documents the current for-profit exploitative model, enables 68,000 annual preventable deaths. The current for-profit model exploits life expectancy and makes it the lowest in the developed world and declining. It makes us have the highest infant and maternal mortality in the developed world and increasing. It ensures 500,000 medical bankruptcies every single year. This means that over the last decade, we have suffered nearly 700,000 preventable deaths, 5 million medical bankruptcies, And over the next decade, we're going to suffer another 700,000 preventable deaths and another 5 million medical bankruptcies. Why? Why do we want to allow this? Is that really worth maintaining an industry that causes this, especially when better alternatives exist? I don't think so. Next myth, universal healthcare means tax hikes. This is one of the most common myths out there, and we just need to address this because universal healthcare in reality means more money in your pocket. Insurance corporations want working people to pretend that the exorbitant fees they charge for limited coverage aren't drawn from the same paycheck from which our taxes are drawn. Studies show that Americans spend at least 19% of their income on healthcare costs, at least 19%. And the thing is that even that is an underestimate because those who are lower income pay a higher rate for healthcare costs. A RAND study dove into this in detail and found that, quote, households in the bottom fifth of income groups pay an average of 33.9% of their income towards healthcare. 33.9%. While families in the highest income group pay 16% of their income towards healthcare. The analysis finds that households in the middle three tiers of income pay between 20 and 23% of their income towards healthcare. Here's why these numbers matter. There is not a universal healthcare model that increases taxes by 34% or 23% or even 19%. It just doesn't exist. Even if income taxes dramatically increase from 24% to 34%, you're still saving between 9 and 24% in your overall take-home pay. Let me illustrate this for you with dollars and cents, because I know percentages can get confusing. Berkeley professor, University of California, two economics professors, Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckman, write this out really well. They say, imagine that somebody earns $50,000 a year, and they're getting $15,000 through their employer to an insurance company. So that means that with universal health insurance, her wage would rise to $65,000, her full labor compensation. The universal healthcare model would require an income tax increase of 6%. So if that's applied, then it would mean that she would have to pay about $4,000 more in taxes every single year. But she would save $15,000 in not having to pay a private health insurance company. So if you're spending $4,000 more, but saving $15,000, that means that your net savings is $11,000. So that means that her salary, which was originally $50,000, now goes up to $61,000, and she has guaranteed universal health care. She has no more deductibles, no more co-pays, no more out-of-pocket costs, no more prescription drug costs. Why? Because the universal healthcare model is designed to maximize access to healthcare, not maximize profits for billion-dollar corporations. Finally, last myth I want to cover. Universal healthcare is going to mean we have long wait times. Just a flat-out lie. For primary physician appointments, Americans already wait longer under our exploitative for-profit model than do people in every developed nation in the world that has universal healthcare. And frankly, I marvel at this allegation as I reflect over the fact that it took us more than 2 years to get our daughter the critical life-saving medication she needed, only because our exploitative for-profit health insurance company refused to accept our doctor's medical instruction. In reality, wait times in the United States are shorter only for elective surgery. But for primary or for critical care, the United States is actually the worst out of every developed nation on earth that has universal healthcare, and that's all of them. So for primary physician appointments, we're waiting about 21 days. Italy, 10 days. UK, 10 days. Spain, 9 days. Sweden, 7 days. France, 6 days. Germany and Australia, 4 days. Switzerland, 2 days. So when you hear these countries complain about having to wait long times, ask them how many days, because there certainly will be outliers, but on average, they're waiting between 2 and 10 days. We are waiting 21 days for required surgery. Moreover, just think about how illogical this claim is that universal healthcare results in long wait times that hurt our health. If that were true, if all these countries that have universal healthcare had long wait times, if that were true, why is it that all these countries have a higher life expectancy than the United States? Why do they all have lower maternal mortality and lower infant mortality than the United States? Why do none of them have medical bankruptcy while we have 500,000 annually? None of this is by accident. It's due to the obvious fact that when healthcare access is dependent on ensuring people are healthy rather than on seeing people as piggy banks, then healthcare is administered faster. And for those who say, well, this is economically unsustainable, look at the British national health system. Yeah, that is struggling because it keeps getting defunded because right-wing politicians in the UK are trying to strip it down for parts and privatize healthcare. Again, not an accident. It's a choice. We need to properly fund healthcare. And a bonus myth that I often hear is, well, I don't want socialized medicine because I'm not paying for other people's healthcare. My dude, how do you think health insurance works? Once you figure that out, you'll realize you're already paying for other people's healthcare as they are paying for your healthcare. And you'll also realize that having a larger pool of money from which to cover costs for everyone actually saves you money. So you would want more people on the plan because it brings down the cost per person. And you'll realize that because more than 75 million Americans right now are uninsured or underinsured, every time they can't pay a medical bill, for-profit insurance companies raise your rates to make up the difference. When they go to the ER and skip out on the bill, guess what? The hospital charges more. The insurance companies say, well, we got to charge more. And then you pay more with health insurance. So even if all you care about is yourself, first of all, shame on you. But even if that's true, you should want everyone to have healthcare because it will lower costs for you as well. That's just a fact. Look, as I posted on Blue Sky a few days ago, that if the killing of the United Health CEO has taught us one thing, it's that maybe we're not as divided as we think. When 90% of people empathize with the people the CEO exploited more than with the CEO who was killed, it should tell our politicians something. Stop bowing to billionaires and actually work for the people. Look, y'all, the facts are clear. Universal healthcare costs less. It renders the same high quality care. It will save at least 68,000 lives annually. It prevents 500,000 medical bankruptcies annually. It ignites job creation. It ignites entrepreneurship. It increases life expectancy. It decreases infant mortality. It decreases maternal mortality. It decreases Black and Indigenous maternal mortality by 300%. It eliminates the for-profit health insurance lobbying, which is exploiting our politicians in America. Literally, the only people who believe we need to spend hundreds of billions on administrative costs are insurance executives who need that precious money for their precious private jets and their yachts and their fifth mansion. I think I can speak for 99% of Americans when I say, to hell with their private yachts and their mansions. America will be better off with more healthcare access and fewer private jets for billionaires. So I leave you with this. Despite how divided we seem as a nation, and we are in many respects, Republicans and Democrats need to be united in the need for healthcare as a human right. We should remember that next time we see somebody putting up a GoFundMe to pay for cancer treatment, because cancer doesn't discriminate on political affiliation. We should remember that next time a loved one gets into a car accident and their deductible is so high they can't even cover that. Because car accidents don't discriminate on political ideology. We should remember that next time someone's child gets sick with an incurable disease, because that child did nothing wrong, those parents did nothing wrong, and that incurable disease did not discriminate based on whether you are left or right leaning. We need to look at the humanity in one another. We need to find ways to look out for one another and be there for one another, because that is how we ultimately protect ourselves and our own humanity as well. This is not me preaching from a pulpit. This is me just spitting basic facts. We need to be our brother's keeper in this space. The enemy is not each other. It is the exploitative billionaires who care less about us than they do about their stock portfolio, about building their shareholder value, even if it means killing 68,000 of our neighbors every single year. Whew. All right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. That's all for now. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button and spread the word, because that's how we're going to get through this, by creating this movement of knowledge, of education. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on social media at Qasim Rashid across all platforms. You have my promise to continue to advocate for a show that builds on compassion, justice, and accountability for those in power. Got a great show lined up for next week. Be sure to tune in, same time, same place at 10 a.m. on Sunday on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126. The most awesome show in the multiverse. And if you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.